here. I am with Karis Realty, and Jeffrey is with Gooseneck Insurance. And we're here today to talk about insurance and divorce and the issues that come up during and after a divorce with relating to insurance. So, Jeffrey, are you with us? Not hearing anything.
Can you hear me now? Better?
Perfect.
All
Yes.
right, sorry about that. Technical difficulties.
Okay. So, Jeffrey, welcome. Tell us a little bit about yourself and Gooseneck Insurance.
Yeah. So I have 13 years of claims experience. So I've been in the insurance industry for a very long time. And currently I run an agency, an insurance agency. It's an independent insurance agency. It's Goosehead Insurance. And I'm a broker. So the best way to describe what I do is I'm like the Amazon for insurance. So I work with Travelers and Allstate and Nationwide and Safeco, you name it, a bunch of A-rated carriers. So I know quite a bit about what happens when there's a loss, whether it be an auto or a home. And then I also focus on helping my customers get the very best coverage for them to, just in case they do have a loss in the future, they know exactly what they're paying for and the importance of insurance.
Super. Well, of course, today we're talking about insurance as it relates to divorce and uh, particularly as it relates, within the real estate field, because many people don't realize that when you're going through a divorce, your status changes in some respects and it doesn't change in others.
Mhm.
So, Jeffrey, let's take the scenario to start things off that you have two spouses who've decided that they are going to get a divorce and they've separated. And one spouse moves out of the home and the other one's staying in the home. Talk to me about the scenario and what it might mean for both parties.
Yeah, so I think the first thing to know is it a temporary or a permanent move? Um, and also the financial interest, right? So for insurance, if you have a financial interest in the home, you're going to want to stay on that home policy, right? So it's very important to make sure that you are still on the home policy so that it is equal, right? So that is if you're prepping and you're getting yourself ready for those types of things. So you're moving out. So when you move out, oh, go ahead.
Yeah, let me delve into that a little bit. So, okay, so you're both staying on the home policy, but now there's a difference, isn't there, between a beneficiary and a named insured on the home policy?
Yeah, so the listed named insureds are, and if they are both on the loan at the time, they should both be on the policy if it's before the divorce. Obviously, after the divorce, that may work its way out. It really depends on how that's set up.
Right.
Um, the thing to think about, the first thing that jumps to my mind is if I'm moving out and I have, and I'm moving into an apartment or whatnot, right? Making sure that my things are still going to be covered as I move into that apartment. So renter's insurance is something that people don't think about. Most landlords require it, but having a good renter's policy is not super expensive and it protects yourself. It protects your things right inside of the home. It also protects you from a liability perspective as well if someone gets hurt on that property. So always a good idea to look into the rental piece if you are moving into another home. A lot of times that will also cover your things while they're in storage.
Okay, so the advice there is if you are the spouse who's moving out, make sure that you've got renter's insurance.
Mhm.
Now, if something happens while you've got that renter's insurance, is it going to reflect back on the spouse who's staying in the home? So say the spouse who's renting is now making a claim.
So if the renter's policy, and I'll say that just to start off really, kind of a disclaimer because different states have different rulings, but if we're talking about Maryland, this is to the best of my knowledge around Maryland piece. And also there are some slight differences from carrier to carrier. So always check, with your carriers. But what I will say is if in the renter's piece, right, if the renter has a loss, it would stay on that person, okay, and that property. So
Okay.
typically what the system's looking for, and that would be a clue report, is looking for what address are you attached to, right? And was there a claim there? And what type of claim it was?
So that's something you mentioned where a lot of people actually don't know what a clue report is. Tell me what a clue report is.
Yeah, so pretty much it's a past history of your claims. In auto, it could be moving violations are kind of included in that report as well. But really, it's a claims loss history report. It's a database that's really shared between all the insurance companies. And they can go back as far as 7 years, depending on the different carriers. Some carriers, you can see it at 5. One of the carriers that I work with, Safeco Insurance, it's 5 years. But if you're both listed on the home and there was a loss, more than likely it's going to be attached to both of you. Okay. So if there is a claim, that's going to pop back up into that report in the future. Multiple losses on the property can stick with you and can move with you as you go and get quotes in the future. You know, the other thing to think about is when you're filing a claim or you're selling say you're selling your home, right? There's two things that the clue report kind of pulls into. One, it looks at the property that you lived at once, but then it also will look at the property that you're moving into, right? And it looks, okay, have there been losses on that property? Was there multiple water losses? Is it a certain type of pipe? So you want to just make sure that
And I know a lot of that's quite important actually when I'm either working with a client to buy or sell a home, we always try and inquire about the insurance status of the home that we're, kind of selling or buying.
there's certain plumbing systems that are prone to leaks, and some carriers are not, they don't find them favorable. So that's one thing to know about, right? But those types of plumbing systems typically have water losses related to them. So if you have multiple water losses, you may be out of the running for insurance for that property, depending on the carrier. I will say some carriers do omit, like they'll remove any kind of cat claims. So if you have, a windstorm or that is or a hurricane, right? And it's categorized as a catastrophic claim. Sometimes that will be pulled out of that report. Okay.
Okay. And okay, so I want to just head back to that whole thing about named insured versus beneficiary, because where it becomes important is I've heard of a case where the named insured was not the same as the beneficiary. And what happened was the person in the house who was named insured made a claim. The check was sent through to the beneficiary, who was the spouse who had moved out of the home. And the spouse who had moved out, so they're not in-house spouse as such, cashed the check, never did the work that was required, and there was nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, so I think the biggest thing that I would recommend is taking a look back at the policy, right? That's the first thing and you're just looking at a declarations page. What the declarations page is going to tell you, named insureds,
Right.
and you want to make sure you're listed as a named insured, right? If you are married, you should technically have been on the policy, okay? The other thing from a beneficiary perspective, we see that in I've seen it in as far as like a mortgage company, right? They would be put in there as well because they have a financial interest in the house. Sometimes if there's individuals that put, have a financial interest into the home, they're listed there kind of like a mortgage company as well. They're just another line item. So the most important thing is making sure you're listed on the policy. If you're listed on the policy as a policy holder, that check will come in one of two ways. Either it will come in both of your names, or it will go directly to a repair provider. For an example, for like an auto loss, right? So if you have an auto claim, we can pay a repair provider directly, or it goes to in both of the individuals' names. It's not supposed to be split up in just in one person's name, especially if you're listed as a policy holder. And that's just from my experience working with the carrier that I did in the claim side of things. We never removed a spouse if they were listed as a policy holder, not a driver. It has to be a policy holder.
Okay, super. And now what happens in the case where, you both had vehicles, there may be kids who've got vehicles, you've got the house, but one spouse has moved out. How's that going to affect insurance?
Yeah, so I think the big thing with the children, right? Typically, they're going to be on the custodial parents policy, right? So it's going to be one or the other. They're not going to be listed on both policies.
So it's an
Normally,
expense the custodial parent needs to think of. And
yes.
I always highlight that because there are a lot of hidden expenses in a divorce. So that, in a way, is a hidden expense.
Yep, yes. The other thing to think about from an expense is when you're moving and you're moving off a policy, the discount for being married is going to fall off, right? So you have to consider that because you're no longer able to say that you're married, right? You can
Right.
classify it as you want to tell your insurance company that you're not single, you list it as divorced because that's what it would actually be coded as, divorced. And there's different discounts for that, coming in as a single person versus a divorced person. So,
And that would happen, you'd literally have to send your insurance agent a copy of the divorce decree, right? So they've got a date to work to. So while you're
yeah,
separated, it remains the same, but as soon as you're divorced and there's an official divorce decree, that goes to your insurance agent and your insurance changes at that point.
absolutely. The biggest thing is making sure that when you have a financial interest in either a vehicle or a home, that you are on that policy until you're able to officially separate and put that item on your own separate policy. Okay. Um,
Super.
so some people ask, can I keep the same? Can we keep it how it is? Right? I wouldn't advise to stay on the same policy. You're no longer going to be living in the same home. Your garaging address has changed. Your mileage to and from work has changed. Your spouse is going to really they will have to provide a consent to allow you to be removed for the most part, or a divorce decree. Like you said, you're going to have to provide that supports to show that I'm no longer together. We need to make the separation. But some people, they leave everything as is, and I would not advise again. You do not want to do that because it can come down and hurt you, right? Your spouse may have a
Right.
poor driving record. They could have a claim. They could start filing multiple claims. And guess what happens? When you go to file for your own and get your own insurance, it can come into play. So you want to make that official when that date is official.
Okay. And now, okay, so what happens if both spouses move out of the house? So the house is
Mhm.
now either empty and or they decide to put a renter in. What happens with insurance there?
So watch out for vacant homes. Your insurance policy has a coverage in there and an exclusion on vacant policies. Typically, 30 days is what I like to say to be safe. Some policies, it's 60 days. But if the home is vacant and no one is there, certain losses are excluded, like thefts or vandalism or theft of property inside of the house. So make sure that you get the right insurance. If the home's going to be vacant, there are carriers that will allow for vacant homes. You just want to talk to your carrier about that. If you're going to rent it out, that policy moves from a standard homeowner's policy to a landlord's policy, in that
Mhm.
you are allowing someone else to rent that home. That's a little bit different of a risk than you being the insured living in that house, right? The insurance company is insuring a property that someone else is living in. So landlord policy is what you would want to line up there.
And for that landlord policy, again, I suppose because both spouses would be on title, they should both be on the landlord policy.
They should. Yep. If you both have financial interest in the home still, should both be on the landlord policy. That's the biggest thing, right? If you have a claim, you want to make sure that you're both there since you both have financial interest. Just like in an auto policy, you want to do that. They always ask you, do you have a lien holder? Because the lien holder has a financial interest in your auto, just like the mortgage lender, right? They've got a financial
Right.
interest in your home. So you want to be on there as well.
And, with that, I was just thinking, um, when it's classified as unoccupied, sometimes, couples will put their home on the market and then move out so that the house is empty and maybe it's staged or maybe it's being shown as empty. Um, do they need to get insurance for that particular period as a special insurance because the house is empty, or do they take it as, look, this is just part of a sale, which is
Selling a
normal
home.
course of something?
Yeah, there is a lot of variabilities on this along the insurance line from carrier to carrier and underwriters and what they classify that temporary absence of living in the
Okay,
home. So my biggest thing is if you're at 30 days or you're looking at it's going to be more than 30 days, I would call your insurance company and ask them and say, hey, the home's going to be vacant for some times, or maybe we'll be there 50% of the time, 25%, whatever it might be. You're going to want to communicate that with the insurance company, because the worst thing that could happen is you have a theft, right? And then it not be covered. And
right.
you're paying this money for insurance that you can't use. So be upfront and open with your insurance company, and they'll tell you. Like I said, one of the big carriers I work with is Safeco Insurance. It's owned by Liberty Mutual. Theirs is 60 days, I believe. But it does vary from carrier to carrier, and especially when you're selling a home, that can be a little bit different. So I would advise to reach out. The biggest thing that you want to do is do something. Call your carrier, call your insurance agent, talk to them about your situation. Don't leave things how they are. That's my best advice here for sure.
So now things change once a divorce uh, comes into effect. The title as such of a property changes in Maryland because you've got tenancy in common and tenancy in the entirety. Now suddenly you have typically one spouse might have the right to stay in the house for up until a year or until a child graduates from high school or something like that. So how does that affect the insurance when now your title's been affected?
Well, from the insurance perspective, title's important, but when you're looking at a policy and financial interest in the home, I think we still want to look back at being a policy holder on that policy.
Okay.
So if you are still have a financial interest, it's still within how everything worked out, and you have that piece, or the home is still part yours, right? Then I would advise to stay on that. Even if the title changes, you still have that financial piece. So there's situations, and it's very different for different carriers, like I said. But my recommendation is to stay with that carrier. Talk to the carrier first. Stay with them, even if the title is moving, but it's part of the settlement, right? To have that financial piece within the home,
Yeah.
then you want to make sure that you are there on that policy.
Okay, super. Certainly have a wet cat trying to come in the window.
You're fine.
Got a love light. Um, okay, and again, then there's also the issue of um, investment properties that may be held. How might they be affected both before and after? Because sometimes, just getting rid of additional assets in itself can take time.
Yeah, I think the same thing with investment properties holds true to personal properties and homeowners, is that if you both have a financial interest in them, that you should both be there listed as policyholders.
Right.
Until that's no longer the case, right? So if a settlement takes place and there's been a payout for, said properties, you get off the policy, right? You're done. We should be removed from the policy for twofold reasons, right? If there's a loss on that policy in the future, again, you're attached to it. So stay very close in contact with your policies, your autos, your homes, landlord policies, any policies that were once part of. Make sure you stay close to them and separate from that when that time is. On the flip side, make sure you're on those policies if you're supposed to be on those policies. So take a
Okay.
look at those, right? You want to make sure you're looking at these things. And if you're supposed to be on those policies, you should be on those policies.
Okay. And I think the last thing is, because there's so many things that people tend to insure as a couple, from house, cars, investment properties, it's jewelry, etc. Um, if there are multiple claims, I'm assuming that it really goes into effect more before the divorce decree as opposed to after the divorce decree, because after the divorce decree, it becomes more independently owned to the individual and their property versus jointly.
Yeah, the insurance company, they keep it just straightforward. Are you on the policy? Are you a listed policy holder? Whatever it is, you're getting a check and it's going in both of your names. That's normally how that works. So that is probably where an attorney is going to have to step in on payments and those type of things. But if you haven't yet had that divorce, right, and that hasn't taken place, settlement hasn't, all that, those things haven't taken place, you want to have the benefits. You want to have the benefits of being an insured on that policy if you have a claim, and being on that check, right? But then you have it, okay, if there's a claim, you're going to be involved. It's going to be on your history.
Right.
So it's hard to have the best of both worlds, right? The first thing you might say is, oh, I got to get off this policy because, if there's a claim and it's on their car, right? So I think that the best thing is to step back and look and say, okay, can we actually separate these things, right? Is that something that we're able to do before the divorce takes place? So a good example of this would be an auto. If the auto's in your name and it's on a joint policy, you should be able to remove that auto and yourself from that policy and insure it elsewhere. If that vehicle is jointly owned, then it's probably going to be tough to do that.
Okay.
It's probably going to be hard to do that because there's still a financial interest from the other spouse in that vehicle, right? So there's a lot of variables that play in there, but moving things around before the divorce, it's possible for the auto side of things. For the home, it's a little harder. You can't split half the house. You can't do those things, right? So, but for the auto and some of your tangibles, like if you had a boat, things like that, you may be able to separate those things up front and work that out beforehand. So, especially if you own it yourself and the other person has no financial interest in that.
Right. So, what I would say to people is, if you know that you are starting the process of divorce and separation, speaking to your insurance agent up front is supremely important to make sure you understand how to navigate this all.
Yeah, that's the biggest thing that I'd recommend is that, it's a tough time. It's hard to talk about a lot of these things, but it's important to do that because it can hurt you in the long run and even in the short term, right?
Right.
But be upfront because there's a lot of variables in that process, and it's different for different carriers. And just by you being upfront and talking to them about that, you have a paper trail of this discussion happening with the carrier, right? And that you're putting up the flag and saying, hey, I need some help on some of these things, right? This is what's happening. Here's the situation. I want to make sure I put myself in the best position going forward, but before the divorce. And then how does that look once that officially takes place? Because it may be moving in certain pieces may move at different times. So.
Mm-hmm. Super. Well, Jeffrey, thank you so much. This has been great. Any other advice you have to give? Do you want to give a plug for Goosehead? Where can
Yeah,
people find you?
yeah, so you guys can find me on Facebook. That's the easiest way to find me. Jeff Bisker with Goosehead Insurance. Or if you look up Goosehead Jeff, I should pop up there. If you put in Google, Jeff Bisker Goosehead, I'll pop right up there. That'll be my page. You'll see all of my reviews. Or just give me a call. My phone number is 443-836-5609. I'd be happy to help and get you guys some quotes and see see what prices look like for renters and home insurance and auto. So
Super. Well, thank you, Jeffrey. And of course, my name is Nicole Aliev. I have a certification in working with people who are going through a divorce and would love to be able to help you. I am a realtor here in Frederick County with Caris Realty, and I work in both Frederick, Washington County, as well as Berkeley and Jefferson counties in West Virginia. Again, my name is Nicole Aliev. My Facebook account is Nicole Sells Frederick. And you're welcome to contact me on 301-305-5169. I'd love to be able to help. Jeffrey, have a great weekend. Thank you.
All right. Thanks for having me, Nicole. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.